It was supposed to be a simple visit to see Grandma Jojo at Elmore Medical Center. Gumball and Darwin had brought her favorite flowers, expecting to find her complaining about the hospital food and demanding they sneak in some donuts. But when they arrived at room 237, they found something far worse than an empty bed. The hospital was too clean, too perfect. Every surface gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, and every staff member moved with mechanical precision. The patients sat in perfect rows, their faces blank and serene, as if all their worries had been surgically removed. "Where's our grandmother?" Gumball asked the nurse at the reception desk. Her smile never wavered as she explained that Grandma Jojo had completed her treatment and achieved perfect health. But when they found her in the treatment wing, she wasn't the feisty old woman they knew. She was calm, emotionless, perfect. The boys soon discovered the horrible truth. Elmore Medical Center wasn't healing people, it was perfecting them, removing their flaws, their emotions, their humanity itself. The doctors, with their white, lifeless eyes, saw imperfection as a disease to be cured. As the hospital's corridors shifted and changed around them, trapping them in an endless maze of sterile white walls, Gumball and Darwin realized they were next. The loudspeaker called their names, inviting them to join the ranks of the perfected. "Don't you want to be perfect like us?" their grandmother asked in a monotone voice. No more pain, no more worry. But perfection, they learned, was just another word for emptiness. And as they stared at their own reflections in the exit doors, they saw the truth. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. In the end, the boys escaped the hospital, but they could never escape the question that haunted them. In a world that demands perfection, what happens to those who refuse to be cured? Sometimes being flawed, being human, is the only thing that makes us. It was supposed to be a simple radio contest to win concert tickets. Gumball and Darwin arrived at the Elmore radio station excited to participate in the live broadcast. But from the moment they spoke into the microphones, something felt wrong. Their voices seemed to echo endlessly through the station, and when they tried to stop talking, the DJ kept encouraging them to continue. A mysterious radio host with static-filled eyes explained that great voices deserved to be heard forever. They discovered other contestants trapped in broadcast booths from different decades, all speaking endlessly into microphones that never stopped recording. The radio station was alive, feeding on voices and sound waves, growing stronger with each person who became lost in the eternal broadcast. The radio master explained that communication was eternal, and the station would provide endless opportunities for anyone who wished to be heard. But the boys realized the only way to escape was to stop speaking entirely. As the radio offered them their own permanent show and fame beyond their dreams, Gumball and Darwin refused to speak. Slowly, the supernatural hold began to weaken, and they led the other contestants towards silence and freedom. They escaped back to the normal world, but they could never listen to radio the same way again. Behind them, the station waited patiently for new contestants, ready to broadcast voices that would never fade. It was supposed to be a simple trip to visit their cousin in Neighborville. Gumball and Darwin had taken the subway dozens of times before, but today something felt different from the moment they descended into Elmore Metro Station. The familiar tiled walls seemed to stretch longer than usual, and the fluorescent lights flickered with an irregular rhythm that made their eyes water. The subway map on the wall showed routes that didn't make sense. Lines curved back on themselves in impossible loops, and some destinations were labeled with question marks or simply said nowhere. When Gumball pointed this out to Darwin, his brother just shrugged and said maybe it was under construction. But the unease in Darwin's voice suggested he noticed it too. When their train arrived, it screeched against the tracks with a sound like metal screaming. The train number displayed as an infinity symbol instead of the usual route designation. Through the windows, they could see other passengers sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead with glassy, unfocused eyes. But they were excited about their weekend trip, so they boarded anyway. The interior of the subway car was clean and modern, with rows of blue seats and hanging straps for standing passengers. As they settled into their seats, the automated announcement system crackled to life with a message that made no sense. Next stop, yesterday. Please mind the gap between reality and destination. The other passengers didn't react at all. as if they hadn't heard anything unusual. That's when Gumball and Darwin began to notice how strange the other passengers really were. They sat in identical poses, never moving, never blinking, never shifting in their seats. Their eyes were open but completely vacant, like windows into empty rooms. When the boys tried to get their attention, the passengers would slowly turn their heads with mechanical precision, revealing hollow, soulless stares. The train passed Elmore Central Station 3 times in a row. Each time, the same people were standing on the platform in exactly the same positions, like a photograph that kept repeating. The clock on the platform showed the same time as when they had first boarded. When Gumball pressed his face to the window and waved at the people outside, they didn't wave back. They didn't even seem to see him. The announcements became increasingly disturbing. Next stop, forever. Final destination, nowhere. Please remain seated for the duration of eternity. The display screens showed messages that flickered between normal station names and ominous warnings. The lights in the car began to flicker in rhythm with the announcements, creating a strobe effect that made everything feel surreal and nightmarish. When they tried to ask other passengers for help, the responses were terrifying. A rabbit in a business suit turned his head toward them with a grinding sound, like rusty machinery. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, only a soft whistling sound like air escaping from a punctured tire. His eyes were completely white, with no pupils or irises visible. They found an old newspaper on the floor, yellowed and brittle with age. The date showed it was from 30 years ago, but it looked like it had been dropped yesterday. Looking around the car with new understanding, they realized some passengers were wearing clothes from decades past. A woman in a 1990s power suit sat covered in a thin layer of dust, as if she had been there for years without moving. When Gumball tried to pull the emergency brake, the handle came off in his hand, revealing it was just a hollow prop. The windows that had shown the familiar tunnel walls now displayed only impenetrable darkness, as if they were traveling through the void between worlds. The train car itself began to feel different, more cramped and oppressive, like the walls were slowly closing in. Then the impossible happened. The subway car began to stretch, extending into the distance like an infinite corridor. Row after row of motionless passengers appeared, stretching as far as they could see in both directions. The ceiling rose higher and higher until it disappeared into darkness above. They were no longer in a train car but in some vast underground cathedral dedicated to eternal travel. The conductor appeared before them, but it wasn't human. It was a tall figure composed entirely of subway tickets, route schedules, and transit maps. The papers that made up its body constantly shifted and rearranged themselves, showing different destinations and times that never made sense. When it spoke, its voice was a combination of automated announcements and radio static. "Welcome to the Eternal Express," it said in a voice like grinding gears. "Your journey has no destination because the journey itself is the destination. You will ride forever, and eventually you will forget why you ever wanted to leave. This is the gift we offer, freedom from the burden of arrival." They looked at their tickets and discovered they had changed. Instead of Elmore to Naperville, they now read one way, no return. The paper was aging before their eyes, yellowing and becoming brittle. Darwin's ticket crumbled to dust in his hands, while Gumball watched his own name fade from the paper until it was completely blank. The subway system revealed its true nature then. Through the windows, they could see they weren't in tunnels at all, but inside a massive underground organism. The tracks were like arteries, pulsing with some alien energy. The stations were organs, processing the trapped passengers and extracting something essential from them. Their train was just one cell in this vast digestive system. Around them, the other passengers were beginning to lose their individual characteristics. Their faces became more generic. Their clothes faded to uniform gray. The lost episode, The Arcade of Echoes, a fourth horror story from the amazing world of Gumball that was never meant to be aired. It started as the perfect Saturday afternoon. Gumball and Darwin had saved up their allowance for weeks, collecting every penny, nickel, and dime they could find, all for one purpose: to spend the entire day at Pixel Palace, Elmore's newest and most advanced arcade. The place had just opened a month ago, and everyone at school had been talking about it non-stop. The arcade was everything they had dreamed of and more. Rows upon rows of gleaming machines stretched as far as the eye could see, each one more spectacular than the last. Classic arcade games stood alongside cutting-edge virtual reality pods. Retro pinball machines shared space with holographic racing simulators, and the air was filled with the symphony of electronic music, digital sound effects, and the excited chatter of dozens of kids having the time of their lives. "This is it, Darwin," Gumball exclaimed, his blue fur practically glowing with excitement as he clutched a plastic cup full of tokens. "This is going to be the best day ever." Darwin nodded enthusiastically, his orange fins flapping with anticipation. "Where should we start? The fighting games? The racing simulators? Oh, what about that new virtual reality zombie game everyone's been talking about?" They spent the first few hours jumping from machine to machine, their laughter mixing with the cacophony of arcade sounds. Gumball dominated at the fighting games, his quick reflexes serving him well against both the computer and other players. Darwin excelled at the puzzle games, his methodical thinking helping him solve complex challenges that left other kids scratching their heads. As the afternoon wore on, the arcade began to empty out. Parents called their children home for dinner, teenagers left to hang out elsewhere, and gradually, the bustling atmosphere gave way to something quieter, more subdued. But Gumball and Darwin were having too much fun to notice. They were completely absorbed in their games, lost in the digital worlds that surrounded them. It wasn't until Gumball looked up from a particularly intense racing game that he realized something was wrong. The arcade was completely empty. Not just mostly empty or nearly empty, but absolutely, utterly devoid of any other human presence. The only sounds were the electronic hums and beeps of the machines themselves, creating an eerie electronic symphony that seemed to echo endlessly through the vast space. "Darwin," Gumball said, his voice suddenly small in the cavernous arcade. "Where is everyone?" Darwin looked around, his eyes widening as he took in the emptiness. I don't know. When did everyone leave? We were just playing, and..." They walked through the rows of machines, their footsteps echoing strangely in the empty space. The games were all still running, their screens flashing and cycling through attract modes, but there was no one to play them. It was as if every person in the arcade had simply vanished into thin air. "Maybe it's closing time?" Darwin suggested hopefully. "Maybe everyone just went home?" But when they looked at the entrance, they found something that made their blood run cold. The front doors were gone. Not locked, not blocked, but simply gone. Where the glass doors and the bright Pixel Palace sign should have been, there was just a solid wall, as if the entrance had never existed at all. "That's impossible," Gumball whispered, running his hands along the smooth wall where the doors should have been. "We came in through here. I remember. We walked right through those doors." They searched frantically for another exit, but every door they found led only to storage rooms, employee areas, or dead ends. The windows, which should have shown the parking lot and the street beyond, now looked out onto an endless void of swirling darkness, as if the arcade existed in the lost episode of The Amazing World of Gumball that never aired. This episode was discovered in the archives of Cartoon Network, labeled only as The Mirror Game, with a warning note, "Do not broadcast." It was a rainy Saturday morning in Elmore when Gumball and Darwin decided to explore the old antique shop that had mysteriously appeared overnight on Shenack Street. The shop had no name, just a faded sign with a cracked mirror symbol. The shop was dimly lit, filled with dusty furniture covered in white sheets. Behind the counter sat an elderly woman with pale skin and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. She smiled with teeth that were too white, too perfect. "Welcome, young ones," she said in a voice that echoed strangely. "I have something special for children like you, a game that will show you your true self." She led them to a large, ornate mirror against the wall. The frame was carved with patterns that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. "This is the mirror game," the woman explained. "Stand in front of the mirror and say your name 3 times. Then the mirror will show you your true self. But once you start, you must finish it." Gumball stepped forward first. "Gumball, Gumball, Gumball," he said confidently. First, nothing happened. Then slowly, his reflection began to change. Instead of his usual expression, the reflection showed Gumball with hollow, empty eyes and a twisted smile. Darwin gasped, "Dude, your reflection isn't copying you." Indeed, while Gumball stood still in shock, his reflection was moving independently, waving with jerky, unnatural movements. "Your turn, little fish," the woman said. Darwin reluctantly stepped forward. "Darwin, Darwin, Darwin," he whispered. His reflection changed too, showing him with scales falling off and torn fins. The reflections began to speak in distorted voices. "Why don't you come inside?" Gumball's reflection asked. "It's so much better in here. No rules, no consequences." The mirror began to ripple like water, and the reflections reached out, pressing against the glass from inside. Cracks appeared on the surface, spreading like a spider web. "The game isn't over," the old woman cackled. "Now you must choose. Stay in your world, or join your true selves in the mirror world. Choose quickly, before the mirror breaks completely." Gumball and Darwin tried to run but couldn't move. They were being pulled toward the mirror by an invisible force. The reflections were now halfway through the glass, reaching out to grab them. "We have to break the mirror," Darwin shouted, but their reflections laughed. "Break the mirror and you break yourselves. We are you and you are us." The shop began to fade away, becoming gray and colorless. Only the mirror remained bright, its surface cracked but intact. As the mirror world pulled them in, Gumball and Darwin realized the horrible truth. They weren't in an antique shop at all. They were already inside the mirror and had been for who knows how long. The real world was just another reflection. The last thing they heard was their own voices calling to other children. "Come play the mirror game with us. You'll never want to